The smell of a new car is supposed to be a cliché, but mine smelled like freedom. It was a deep, metallic blue, a 3-year-old certified pre-owned Mazda that was still new to me. For the first time in my 25 years, I felt like I was actually in the driver's seat of my own life. My name is Olivia, and for the past year, I've been working 2 jobs to make this moment happen. My 9-to-5 as an administrative assistant, and my weekend gig bartending until 2 a.m. Every dollar I saved, every social event I missed was for this. For the solid thud of the door closing and the quiet hum of an engine that was all mine. I had exactly 1 week of that freedom. It was a Tuesday when my phone buzzed with my mother's name. I was at the apartment I share with my best friend Peyton, still buzzing from my commute home, where I took the scenic route just because I could. Olivia, you need to come over. Now. My mother, Tricia, didn't do greetings. Her voice was tight with a familiar, manufactured panic. Mom, what's wrong? Is everyone okay? It's your brother. Just get here. The line went dead. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Adam, my older brother, was the son my family orbited around. At 28, he was charismatic, handsome, and professionally adrift. But you'd never know it from the way my parents propped him up. Any trouble he found was never his fault. It was a temporary setback for a future star. I drove my new car to my parents' house, the same pristine suburban colonial I grew up in. The house, like my family, was all about appearances. Perfectly manicured lawn, not a single shutter out of place. Inside, my father, Jean, was standing stiffly by the fireplace, his face a mask of disappointment. My mother was pacing the living room, her arms crossed so tightly she looked like she might snap. And there was Adam slouched on the velvet sofa, scrolling through his phone as if he were waiting for a bus. He didn't even look up when I walked in. What's going on? I asked, my keys still in my hand. My mother stopped pacing and fixed her eyes on me. They took his car, Olivia. The tow truck came this morning. In broad daylight. The neighbours saw everything. I looked at Adam. He was driving a sleek Audi A5, a car my dad had co-signed the loan for 2 years ago. They repossessed it. Why? Adam finally looked up, his expression one of pure annoyance, not shame. I missed a couple of payments. It's a misunderstanding. 3 payments, Adam, my father said, his voice low. It was the most I'd hear from him all night. It's humiliating, my mother cut in, her voice rising. For this family to be subjected to that kind of spectacle. What will people think? I waited for the part where this involved me. It didn't take long. Tricia's eyes flickered down to the keys in my hand. A predatory gleam I knew all too well came into her eyes. Your brother needs a car, Olivia. He has a reputation to maintain. He can't be seen taking Ubers. The knot in my stomach turned to ice. Okay, so he can look for something more affordable. A used Civic or something. I can help him search online. My mother let out a short, sharp laugh that wasn't remotely funny. Don't be ridiculous. He can't drive a Civic. We're not that kind of family. He'll take yours. The words hung in the air, so absurd I almost laughed back. He'll what? Mum, I just bought my car. I worked for a year to save for it. And we're very proud of you, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. You've shown you can be responsible. And now you can do something for your family. Adam needs it more than you do. It's a temporary solution until we can sort this out and get him something better. I stared at her, then at my father, who was now intently studying a spot on the mantelpiece. I looked at my brother, who was smirking down at his phone, confident this was already a done deal. They had discussed this. They had decided my sacrifice before I even walked through the door. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a gunshot in the silent room. Absolutely not. My mother's face hardened. The mask of concerned matriarch fell away, revealing the cold, ruthless woman underneath. Don't be selfish, Olivia. This is about our family's image. Your brother has been through a lot. He needs our support. My support is not my car, I said, my voice gaining strength. He's a 28-year-old man. He can take responsibility for his own mistakes. That was the wrong thing to say. Tricia's eyes narrowed to slits. She took a step toward me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You have a job you can get to on public transportation. He has a life to lead. A girl like you can take the bus. A girl like you can take the bus. The words hit me harder than a slap. A girl like me. The girl who worked 60-hour weeks. The girl who packed her own lunch every day to save money. The girl who hadn't bought a new pair of jeans in a year. That girl. The one who was disposable. For a second, the room went quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds of my compliance. I looked from my mother's furious face to my father's averted gaze. He was staring at his shoes now, as if they held the secrets to the universe. Adam was still looking at his phone, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch into a smirk. He was enjoying this. No, I said again, my voice colder this time. The answer is no. I am not giving my car to Adam. I tried a different tactic, appealing to the logic I knew my father, an accountant, had to possess somewhere. Look, I can help him budget. We can find a reliable car for a few $1,000s. He could get a part-time job on weekends like I did. He could pay you guys back for the down payment, my mother scoffed, a sound like tearing silk. Olivia, stop. Your brother is not going to work as a barista. He's networking. He's building his brand. Do you have any idea how damaging it would be for him to be seen driving some beater? It's more damaging to have his car repossessed in front of the whole neighbourhood, I shot back, my voice finally rising. Whose fault is that? That is enough, Tricia snapped, pointing a finger at me. I will not have you disrespecting your brother in this house. He made a mistake. Families are supposed to help each other, not kick them when they're down. I don't know when you became so selfish. Selfish. The word echoed in my head. All my life, I'd been the good one. The easy one. I got good grades, I never asked for much. I faded into the background, while Adam's every achievement was framed, and his every misstep was cushioned by my parents' money and excuses. The one time I bought something for myself, something I had bled for, I was selfish. He's not down, Mum. He's sitting right there, perfectly fine, I said, gesturing to my brother, who finally pocketed his phone, looking bored. This is ridiculous, Adam said, speaking for the first time. He stood up, stretching like a cat. Liv, just give me the keys. Dad will pay your insurance for a few months to make up for it. It's not a big deal. He said it so casually, with such profound entitlement, that all the air left my lungs. He didn't see a sister who had sacrificed. He saw an obstacle, and a minor one at that. He truly believed he was entitled to the fruits of my labour. I clutched the keys in my hand, the metal biting into my palm. No, Adam. That's when my mother moved. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, her nails like claws aiming for my fist. Give them to me, Olivia. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. I flinched back instinctively, yanking my hand away and taking a step toward the door. The speed of her movement shocked me. She had actually tried to physically take them from me, my own mother. The sight of it, this desperate, ugly grab for something I had earned, flipped a switch in my head. The hurt that had been churning in my gut cooled into something hard and sharp. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. I saw them all clearly for the first time. My mother, the ruthless stage manager, my father, the silent audience, and Adam, the star of the show who never had to learn his lines. I was just a prop. I stopped backing away. I straightened my shoulders and looked my mother in the eye. The fight drained out of my face, replaced by a calm that seemed to unnerve her more than my yelling had. Fine, I said, my voice even. You're right. It's a family matter. A wave of relief washed over my mother's face. My father finally looked up. Adam leaned against the wall, a victorious smirk playing on his lips. They thought they won. They thought they had broken me, like always. I'll think about it, I said softly. I need a little time. Tricia's smile was triumphant. Of course, dear. We knew you'd do the right thing. You always do. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I walked out of the living room, down the hall, and out the front door, the sound of their placated murmuring behind me. I got into my beautiful blue car, the engine starting with a quiet, reassuring purr. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. They thought I was thinking it over. They thought I was crumbling. They were wrong. I was done thinking. I was plotting. I drove straight to my apartment, my mind racing 1,000,000 miles a minute. The moment I walked in, Peyton took one look at my face and set down her laptop. "Okay," she said, her voice serious. "On a scale of 1 to your mother just rearranged the furniture in your childhood bedroom without telling you, how bad is it?" Peyton had been my best friend since college. She knew my family's dynamics better than anyone, having witnessed years of Adam's golden boy treatment firsthand. "It's a 10, I said, sinking onto our lumpy sofa. "They want my car." I explained the whole sordid scene, the repossession, the demand, my mother's attempted key snatching. Peyton listened, her expression shifting from disbelief to pure rage on my behalf. "Are you kidding me?" she finally exploded. "After you worked your butt off for a solid year, they have the audacity to demand you just hand it over to Adam because he can't manage his own finances." "It's about the family image," I said, making air quotes. "Adam can't be seen taking the bus, but a girl like me can." Peyton's eyes narrowed. "Oh, hell no. We are not letting that happen. What's your plan?" "That's the thing," I said, a slow, wicked idea starting to form. I told them I'd think about it. They think I'm going to cave. "But you're not." It wasn't a question. "No." "I'm going to get his car back for him." Peyton stared at me, confused. "Wait, what?" "Liv, no. You can't reward his behaviour." "I'm not going to give it to him," I clarified, a grim smile touching my lips. "I'm going to buy it. And then I'm going to give it away to someone who actually deserves it, in front of all of them." Peyton's jaw dropped. Then a slow, delighted grin spread across her face. "Olivia Fowler, you are an evil genius. I love it. But how are you going to find it?" "Repossessed cars go to auction, right? It could be anywhere." She was right. I needed information, and I knew exactly who to get it from without raising any suspicion. The next day, I called Brodie Underwood, Adam's best friend since high school. Brodie was a nice enough guy, if a bit of a lapdog for my brother. He'd always had a bit of a crush on me, which I now planned to use to my full advantage. I caught him on his lunch break, feigning concern. "Hey, Brodie." "I heard about what happened with Adam's car. He's so upset. He's barely talking to me about it." "Yeah, man, it's brutal," Brodie said, his voice full of sympathy for his friend. "His old man is pissed, but you know Adam, he'll bounce back." "I know," I said, laying it on thick. "I just feel so bad. I was thinking maybe I could help him out, you know, at least find out where the car is." "Do you know which company took it?" "Oh, I don't know the tow company, but I know the bank uses Premier Auto Auctions to offload their repos. He was looking it up on their site last night, trying to see if he could get someone to buy it back for him." "Jackpot. Premier Auto Auctions?" "Thanks, Brodie. You're a lifesaver. Don't tell Adam I asked, okay? I want to surprise him." "No problem, Liv. Your secret's safe with me." As soon as I hung up, I was on the auction site. It took me less than 10 minutes to find it. A silver 2021 Audi A5. VIN number and all. My heart hammered against my ribs when I saw the listing. The auction was online, with the final bids closing in 3 days. I spent the next 2 days playing the part of the dutiful daughter. I dodged my mother's calls, responding with vague texts like, "Still thinking." It's a big decision. At home, Peyton and I were in full-on strategy mode, calculating how much I could afford to bid and what my absolute limit was. It would eat up a significant chunk of my savings, but the thought of the look on my family's faces made it feel like an investment. The tension was mounting. Adam, believing I was on the verge of surrendering my Mazda, had already started bragging. Peyton, who followed him on social media, showed me his latest post. It was a picture of him leaning against a friend's convertible with the caption, "Out with the old, in with the new. Big upgrade coming my way soon, thanks to some amazing family connections." Blessed. "The absolute nerve of this guy," Peyton seethed, throwing her phone onto the couch cushions. He's already celebrating. He thinks he has you wrapped around his little finger. That's what I'm counting on, I said, my eyes fixed on the auction countdown timer on my laptop screen. 76 hours to go. My mother called again that evening, her voice syrupy sweet. Olivia, darling. Your father and I were just talking about how mature you're being about this. We're so proud. I'm still weighing my options, Mom, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Of course, dear, but we know you'll make the right choice for the family. The right choice for them. I hung up the phone, the anger solidifying into resolve. They had no idea what choice I was about to make. But they were going to find out. The day of the auction, my stomach was a mess of knots. I'd transferred a hefty sum from my savings account to my checking, an amount that made my hands shake. This was the money I'd earmarked for a down payment on a condo someday. Now it was my war chest. I called in sick to my admin job, telling my boss I had a stomach bug, which wasn't far from the truth. Peyton took the day off too, for moral support. We sat side by side on the sofa, my laptop open, the auction page glowing like a portal to a different life. You got this, she said, squeezing my shoulder. Remember the plan. Set your max bid and walk away if it goes over. Don't get emotional. I nodded, my mouth dry. The final bidding window opened at noon. For the first hour, the price on Adam's Audi crept up slowly. My initial bid, placed under an anonymous username, was quickly surpassed. My heart pounded with every new offer that appeared on the screen. It was mostly car dealers, I figured, looking to flip it for a profit. With 10 minutes left, the price jumped significantly. A bidding war had started. Okay, this is it, I whispered, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Stick to your limit, Liv, Peyton reminded me. It's not worth going into debt over. My limit was $15,000. It was a painful number, but based on the car's blue book value and condition, I knew it was a fair price. The current bid was at $14,500. I took a deep breath and typed in my max bid, $15,000. The system registered it. Now all I could do was watch the countdown. 5 minutes left. The bid held. 3 minutes. Still me. 1 minute. My screen refreshed. A new high bid appeared. $15,250. Damn it, I hissed. Someone else had an auto bid set just above mine. Let it go, Peyton said gently. It's over the limit. But it wasn't just a car. It was the principle. It was the smug look on Adam's face, the dismissive tone in my mother's voice. It was every holiday where my gifts were an afterthought, every dinner where my accomplishments were glossed over. I thought of Adam's social media post, his unearned confidence that my hard work belonged to him. Screw the limit, I muttered. I typed in a new number, $15,500. Liv, don't, Peyton warned. The screen flashed. You are the high bidder! The final 30 seconds ticked down with agonizing slowness. 10, 9, 8. My breath hitched. 3, 2, 1. Bidding closed. Sold! The word hung on the screen. I had won. I had just spent over $15,000 on my entitled brother's repossessed sports car. A wave of nausea and exhilaration washed over me. Oh my God, I breathed. I did it! Peyton threw her arms around me. You actually did it! You're insane! And I am so proud of you. The rest of the day was a blur of online paperwork and arranging a wire transfer. By 5 o'clock, the car was legally mine. The auction house emailed me the temporary registration and a receipt. The official title and transfer documents would be mailed to my address. That evening, I went to my parents' house. I had to see them. I had to play my part. I found them in the kitchen, my mother sipping a glass of wine, my father reading the paper. Olivia, darling, my mother said, her smile bright and brittle. We were just talking about you. I've made my decision, I said, keeping my face a careful blank. About the car. Adam wandered in from the living room, drawn by the conversation. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a lazy, expectant smile on his face. I'll do it, I said. I'll help Adam. My mother's relief was palpable. She rushed over and hugged me, her perfume cloying. "Oh, I knew you would." "You have such a good heart. You're a wonderful daughter and a wonderful sister." "Yeah, thanks, Liv," Adam said with a nod. "I appreciate it." He said it like I'd just offered him the last slice of pizza. "We'll make it right by you, honey," my father added, finally looking at me. "We'll cover your bus pass," stuttered. I just nodded, the irony a bitter taste in my mouth. I let them praise me, let them talk about my maturity and my selflessness. I listened as my mother planned a special family brunch for the upcoming Sunday, where I could formally give Adam the keys. It was all for show, a public display of our perfect, supportive family. "That sounds lovely, Mum," I said, my voice betraying nothing. I left soon after, their condescending praise echoing in my ears. Back in my own car, I pulled the auction receipt from my purse. The paper felt solid, real. They thought they were playing me, manipulating me into submission with their practiced blend of guilt and fake affection. They had no idea I was playing a different game entirely, and I was just getting started. With Adam's car secured and my family placated, the next phase of my plan felt less like revenge and more like justice. I spent the next morning researching local non-profits. I didn't want to just give the car away. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to go somewhere that would completely negate the selfish, image-obsessed world my family lived in. My search led me to the Beacon House for Women, a shelter on the other side of town that provided housing and resources for women and children escaping domestic violence. Their website was simple, direct, and focused on one thing, providing a safe escape route. It was perfect. I called the number listed on their site, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm. A calm, steady voice answered. "Beacon House. This is Vera." "Hi, my name is Olivia Fowler," I began, suddenly feeling awkward. "I'd like to make a donation. It's a bit unusual." "We appreciate all forms of support, Ms. Fowler. What did you have in mind?" "A car," I said. "It's a 2021 Audi A5. It's in great condition." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her processing the information. A luxury sports car was probably not their typical donation. "That's an incredibly generous offer," Vera said, her voice still calm, but with a new note of professional curiosity. "May I ask why you chose us?" "I read about your mission," I said, the words coming out more honestly than I expected. "About providing women with a way out. I think that's important." "It is," she agreed. "Could you perhaps come by this afternoon? I'd like to meet you and discuss the logistics." A gift of this value has certain procedures we need to follow. When I arrived at the shelter, it was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't a grim, imposing building, but a large, converted Victorian house with a well-tended garden out front. It looked like a home. Vera Wise met me at the door. She was a woman in her late 30s, with a quiet strength that was immediately apparent. She wasn't tall or imposing, but she carried herself with an unshakable sense of purpose. She led me to a small, tidy office. "Thank you for coming in, Olivia. Please have a seat." We talked for nearly an hour. I told her a carefully edited version of the story, framing it as a family car that was no longer needed and that I wanted to see it put to good use. I didn't need to share the ugly details of my family drama. The purpose was what mattered. Vera listened patiently, her eyes never leaving mine. She told me about the shelter, about the women who arrived with nothing but the clothes on their backs and their children in their arms. "Transportation is one of our biggest hurdles," she explained. "Getting women to job interviews, to court appointments, to doctor's visits safely and discreetly. Sometimes it's the middle of the night, and a woman needs an emergency pickup from a dangerous situation. A reliable vehicle is more than a convenience for us. It's a lifeline." As she spoke, I saw it all so clearly. This car, which to my brother was a status symbol, a toy to bolster his fragile ego, could be a getaway vehicle for a woman who had nothing. It could be the difference between staying in a violent home and starting a new life. The rage I felt toward my family began to transform into something else, something cleaner and more powerful. This wasn't just about humiliating Adam anymore. It was about taking something that represented entitlement and privilege and turning it into a symbol of freedom for people who had been denied it. "I want you to have it," I said, my voice thick with emotion, no strings attached. Vera gave me a small, thoughtful smile. "I believe you, but the shelter's board has strict policies. We can't accept a private donation of this magnitude without a formal appraisal and a public acknowledgement. It's for transparency, to ensure everything is above board." My heart sank for a second, thinking my plan was about to hit a legal roadblock. A quiet, private handover wasn't what I had in mind at all. I needed an audience. Then her words registered. Public acknowledgement. A slow smile spread across my face. "A public acknowledgement is fine," I said. "In fact, I think I have the perfect event in mind." I explained my mother's plan for the celebratory family brunch that Sunday. The formal handover. The gathering of relatives to witness my generosity. Vera listened, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She was sharp. She could read between the lines of my carefully constructed story. She saw the shape of the injustice without me having to draw it for her. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. I held my breath, worried she would find my plan petty or too theatrical for her organisation to be involved in. "Our women are often made to feel small," Vera said finally, her voice soft but firm. "They're told their needs don't matter. They're undervalued in their own homes. To see another woman take back her power, that's not a petty act, Olivia. It's a statement." She leaned forward slightly. "We would be honoured to accept your donation." We spent another few minutes working out the details. She would come to my parents' house at a specific time on Sunday, along with 2 other staff members from the shelter. I would have all the paperwork ready, the title, the bill of sale, a pre-filled donation form for the shelter's records. As I stood to leave, a deep sense of calm settled over me. This was right. I shook Vera's hand, feeling the strength in her grip. I saw in her a reflection of the woman I hoped to become, one who didn't need to shout to be heard, whose power came from her integrity. "Don't worry," I said as I reached the door. "We're not doing this quietly." The Sunday of the family dinner, my mother had upgraded it from a brunch to a more formal affair, arrived with a sky the colour of dishwater. It felt appropriate. I spent the morning getting the car ready. I'd picked it up from the auction lot the day before, driving it straight to a storage unit I'd rented for 48 hours. I had it detailed inside and out until the silver paint gleamed and the leather interior smelled brand new. It looked perfect. A perfect trophy for the golden boy. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress. I wanted to look serious, not celebratory. In my purse, I had a large envelope containing the car's title, signed over not to Adam Fowler, but to the Beacon House for women. I drove the Audi to my parents' house, my own Mazda safely parked back at my apartment. Pulling into their driveway felt surreal. This was the car that had started it all. As I turned off the engine, I saw my 17-year-old cousin, Savannah, watching me from the porch. She was my aunt's daughter, a quiet, observant kid who always seemed to be taking in more than she let on. She gave me a small, uncertain wave. The house was buzzing. My mother, in her element as the gracious host, had invited aunts, uncles, and a few close family friends. It was a command performance. The prodigal son was being restored to his rightful place, and the dutiful daughter was playing her part. "There she is!" my mother trilled as I walked in, kissing the air next to my cheek. "And you brought the car! It looks wonderful, darling." Adam was holding court in the living room, accepting backpats from our uncles. He caught my eye and gave me a confident wink, as if we were co-conspirators. The sight of it hardened my resolve. He didn't see sacrifice. He saw a transaction that was owed to him. For the next hour, I played my role. I accepted praise for my generosity. I listened to my Aunt Carol tell me what a good girl I'd always been. I smiled and nodded, a silent actress in a play I was about to set on fire. My father gave my shoulder a brief, awkward squeeze, his only acknowledgement of the event. Finally, after everyone had eaten, my mother clinked her wine glass with a spoon. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment. The room quieted. "As you all know, we've had a little hiccup in the family recently. but what matters is how a family pulls together in times of trouble. And I have never been prouder of my daughter Olivia for showing us all what true family loyalty looks like. All eyes turned to me. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck, but my hands were steady. Olivia has a little something she'd like to give to her brother, my mother continued, beaming. Olivia, dear. This was my cue. I stood up, the envelope in my hand. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Thank you, Mom. Before I do that, I just have a brief announcement to make. Right on schedule, the doorbell rang. My mother frowned, annoyed at the interruption. Jean, can you get that? My father opened the door to reveal Vera Wise, flanked by 2 other women in professional attire. They looked calm and composed, a stark contrast to the boisterous, wine-flushed atmosphere in the room. We're here for the donation, Vera said, her voice clear and steady, easily carrying into the living room. Confusion rippled through the guests. My mother shot me a questioning look. Donation? Olivia, what is this? They're my guests, Mom, I said. I walked past her toward the front door and extended a hand to Vera. Thank you so much for coming. I turned back to face the room of stunned faces. Adam was no longer smiling. His expression was a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion. As Mom said, family is about pulling together, I began, my voice ringing with a clarity I didn't know I possessed. It's about supporting those who need it most. That's why I've decided to make a donation in the Fowler family name. I walked toward the front door, gesturing for everyone to follow. If you'll all join me outside. Like mesmerised sheep they followed. My mother, my father, my aunts and uncles, and a very smug-looking Adam. He clearly thought this was all part of some elaborate, theatrical handover to him. He walked to the front of the pack, positioning himself right next to the driver's side door of the Audi. He grinned, reaching out his hand for the keys I was holding. All right, Liv, you've had your fun. Lay 'em on me. I looked at his outstretched hand, then at his expectant face. And then I walked right past him. I didn't even hesitate. I walked straight to Vera, who was standing by the passenger side, and held out the envelope and the keys. The look of pure shock on my brother's face was worth every single penny I had spent. Vera, I said, my voice projecting across the silent driveway, on behalf of a family that believes in providing support where it's truly needed, I'd like to donate this vehicle to the Beacon House for Women. I placed the keys and the envelope containing the signed title into her hands. Vera accepted them with a nod, her expression one of quiet dignity. Olivia, on behalf of the women and children we serve, thank you. This car will be a lifeline. It will provide safe passage for those escaping dangerous situations and help them on their journey to a new life. A collective gasp went through the crowd of family members. Across the driveway, a neighbour who had been out gardening had stopped to watch the spectacle. The public humiliation was just beginning. Adam's face had turned a blotchy, furious red. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. What the hell, Olivia? Is this a joke? No joke, Adam, I said, turning to face him. My voice was calm, devoid of the anger that had been simmering for years. It was just clear. The car is hers. You can't do that, my mother shrieked, finally finding her voice. She rushed forward, her face a mask of fury. That car was for your brother. We had an agreement. Our agreement was that I would help Adam, I replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. And I have. I've helped him by taking a symbol of his irresponsibility and turning it into a tool for someone else's survival. Seems like a fair trade. You selfish little brat! Trisha's voice was shrill, cracking under the strain. After everything we've done for you. What have you done? I asked, the question genuine. You demanded I sacrifice my own hard-earned property to protect his image. You tried to snatch my keys from my hand. You called me selfish for wanting to keep something I worked 60-hour weeks to buy. Also, he wouldn't have to face a single consequence. I looked past her, at the stunned faces of my aunts and uncles, at my father who looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. This was never about a car, I said, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I had. It was about a lifetime of being treated as less than, of being the backup plan, the safety net, the disposable daughter. This car was just the final invoice. I looked directly at Adam, whose fists were clenched at his sides. I've just returned what never should have belonged to him in the first place. Your attention. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. No one knew what to say. The perfect family portrait had been ripped to shreds, and they were all standing in the wreckage. Then a small voice cut through the tension. I wish I had your courage. It was Savannah, my 17-year-old cousin. She was standing slightly behind her mother, her eyes wide and shining, with something that looked like awe. She had seen the whole dynamic, not just today, but for years, and she understood. My mother shot her a venomous look, but Savannah didn't back down. That single sentence from her was worth more to me than 1,000 apologies from the rest of them. Adam finally snapped. You'll regret this, Olivia, he snarled, pointing a shaking finger at me. You're out. You hear me? You're out of this family. Was I ever really in it? I asked softly. There was nothing left to say. The performance was over. Vera and her colleagues were already getting into the Audi, starting it up. The quiet hum of the engine was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. I turned my back on all of them. On my furious mother, my impotent father, and my raging, entitled brother. I walked down the driveway, my steps feeling lighter than they had in years. I could feel their eyes on my back, a mixture of hatred and shock. I reached into my pocket and my fingers closed around the familiar shape of my own car keys, the keys to my Mazda. They were still there. They had always been mine. As I walked away from the house, from the family, from the life that had been suffocating me, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt free. I was alone, but for the first time I was whole. My dignity was intact, and it was all I needed. The fallout was immediate and exactly what I expected. My phone blew up with texts from my mother, each more venomous than the last, declaring me disowned. My father sent a single terse message. You've made your choice. Adam, true to form, took the fight to social media. He posted a vague, dramatic status about being betrayed by his own blood, and friends like Brody, who only knew Adam's side of things, filled the comments with sympathetic messages. It stung, but it was a distant, numb sort of pain. The silence from my family was deafening in the first few days. I half expected them to show up at my apartment to try one last time to berate me into submission, but they didn't. The line had been drawn, and I had willingly stepped over it. Peyton was my rock, keeping me sane with bad movies and a steady supply of takeout, reminding me that the family I chose was stronger than the one I was born into. But then, unexpected things started to happen. A few days after the disastrous dinner, I got an email from a woman who had been a guest there, one of my mother's friends. She wrote, I won't pretend to know the whole story, but I saw how you stood up for yourself. It was brave. That was it, but it was enough. A week later, I received a thick envelope in the mail. It was from the Beacon House. Inside was a stack of handwritten cards. Some were from the staff, but most were anonymous notes from the women at the shelter. They were simple, powerful messages. Thank you for helping us. You've given someone a chance to be safe. Your car is our hope. I read every single one, the paper growing soft from my tears. My petty act of revenge had blossomed into something genuinely good. The biggest surprise came in the form of a LinkedIn message. It was from a man who owned a local logistics company. He was one of my parents' neighbours and had seen the whole thing unfold from his front yard. His message was direct. Anyone who can handle a hostile negotiation with that much calm and strategic thinking is someone I want on my team. I have an opening for a project coordinator. I think you'd be a great fit. The pay is significantly better than an admin job. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words. He wasn't offering me a job out of pity. He was offering it because he saw my strength, the very quality my family had tried so hard to suppress. That weekend, there was a quiet knock on my apartment door. It was Savannah. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder as if her mother might materialise out of thin air. My mom would kill me if she knew I was here, she said, stepping inside. But I had to come. What you did, It's all anyone in the family is talking about. They're all on your parents' side, but I'm not. She looked me right in the eye. I see it now. The way they treat you, the way they've always treated you, it's not right. I don't want to be like that. We talked for over an hour. It was the first real conversation we'd ever had. I saw a spark in her, a fierce intelligence and a desire for something more than the suffocating expectations of our family. In a strange way, by breaking my own chains, I had shown her that hers weren't permanent either. A few weeks later, after I'd accepted the new job and was starting to build a life that felt truly my own, I was driving home late one night. My route took me down the main road that passed the entrance to my parents' subdivision. On an impulse, I turned in, my hands tight on the wheel of my Mazda. I didn't know what I was looking for. Closure, maybe. I drove slowly down their street. The house was lit up, every window glowing with a warm, inviting light that I knew was a lie. As I passed, I saw a silhouette in the living room window. It was my mother, standing there, looking out into the darkness. For a split second, our eyes might have met. I felt a pang, a ghost of the daughter I used to be, the one who would have done anything for her approval. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't slow down, I didn't wave, I didn't even look back in the rearview mirror. I just kept my foot steady on the gas pedal, my headlights cutting a path forward into the night. The house, and the ghosts within it, grew smaller and smaller behind me, until they were just another memory in a life that was finally, completely mine.